Hey, this is Anthony Cesare, and in this video, I'm going to show you 3 big mistakes I made in one of my songs.
Damn it! Damn it! Damn it!
So that once you see what they are, you'll avoid making them yourself in your own music. The song is called Imagine How Great It Would Be. Imagine how great it would be. And in the second mistake, I'm going to show you a really basic thing I just wasn't able to see when I started this song, and that one should be the easiest thing for you to implement yourself. But first, I want to talk about an aspect of this song's melody, since melody writing is such an important part of songwriting. One of the things that could have been written better melodically would have been to fill in or reduce the wide spaces in between each melodic line in the verses. In contemporary music, there generally aren't a lot of big empty spaces between each line of melody, simply as a matter of retaining listeners' interest. But take a listen to the big gaps between the melodic lines I had in the verses of Imagine How Great It Would Be.
If I was watching people sort through the airport, I'd want to tie a string to their bags.
By the way, if this is the kind of songwriting information you're interested in and want more of, be sure to subscribe to this channel and stay updated on our latest songwriting videos, and grab your free songwriting cheat sheets with the little I in the upper right hand corner of the video or in the description below. Okay, so of course one option is to simply have shorter rests in between each melodic line, which I actually did do in the chorus of this same song.
Imagine how great it would be if that change in the world happened because of me. A tiny idea in my mind that made everyone see.
Now, this isn't to say that having spaces between your vocal lines is bad. You'll actually hear plenty of songs that have them, but if you do have those gaps, it's usually a good idea to fill them in with something. Here's how I resolved a similar issue in a more recent song. In the verse of a song called Your Dream Will Keep On Growing,
Your dream will keep on growing.
I added a repeat of the last word in the line, but then on the repeated word, the word changed pitch and texture, which filled in the space between the lines and made it more interesting than it would have been without it.
Covering your ears with why you can't. Doesn't seem to stop its nagging chant.
Now, that doesn't mean that this solution of changing the texture and pitch of the repeating backing vocal to fill the space would have been the right choice in Imagine How Great It Would Be.
Imagine how great it would be.
But the concept of filling that space is there. In another more recent song called Dawns in Your Eyes,
Dawns in your eyes.
I used this wavering, reverby sound to fill in a couple spaces in between melodic lines, and then in the third space, I added backing vocals.
Flawlessly timed, debuting your soul without any place left to hide. Your dreams start to shine in the light.
The thing is, ultimately, I was happy with the melody in Imagine How Great It Would Be.
Imagine how great it would be.
And I wouldn't have wanted to change the melody itself to eliminate the vocal rests, so I would have been better off just filling in those spaces with something interesting to help maintain the listener's retention. If you want to hear the melody of this song in its entirety, I've got a link on the screen and below the video where you can check it out. Now, in a minute, I'll get to some specific production details that could have made this song better. But the second mistake is that I recorded this song when I just started learning about music production. It was my very first song that I attempted to record and produce on my own. It was exciting to be learning this stuff, so I picked my favorite original song to play on my acoustic guitar at the time, which was Imagine How Great It Would Be. And what I learned the hard way from that was, as someone who was still in the early stages of the learning process, I didn't realize how many mistakes I'd make. As a result, I ended up having the song mixed 3 times trying to fix what I didn't like. Learning from your mistakes is necessary for growth, but all those inevitable beginner mistakes don't have to be on your favorite original song. That's why in hindsight, it would have been better to start my recording process with a cover song, or maybe an older original song that I wasn't that crazy about, something that I wouldn't have minded messing up a bit. I would even extend this advice beyond your first song too. You're always going to be making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, which is important. But on those first handful of songs, you want to practice on songs that aren't that meaningful to you so you can work out some of those inevitable beginner roadblocks. Because in the beginning, I just didn't understand how good or bad my final product was. So how exactly did the song Imagine How Great It Would Be get screwed up by being my first self-track song? Well, it happened in a bunch of ways, but as one example, I originally recorded this song with a live drummer, and I ended up screwing up the drum timing with bad edits, so I killed the groove in some spots. My ear wasn't good enough to nail those small adjustments that needed to be made. I also mixed the song myself, which is fine as a learning tool, but I don't think there's a mixing engineer alive who will tell you he's proud of his very first mix. Take a listen to a few seconds of that first mix that I did myself.
Imagine how great it would be if that change in the world happened 'cause of me.
So yeah, it was good for learning, but definitely not up to any quality standards. A while later, I was wrapping up 5 other songs that I wanted to include with this song on an EP called Staring Down a Globe. But this song, Imagine How Great It Would Be, had to sound better than my initial stab at it. So this time I had it mixed by an experienced mixing engineer. And at that point, I didn't change anything. I just handed it off to the mixing engineer, assuming a new mix was going to fix any problems that I had created. That's when I realized that the mixing that I had done was only one of the problems, because even in a new mix, all the issues I created before mixing were still present, like the way I tracked certain instruments and that drum timing was still off in certain spots. And there were all these things that a new mix didn't solve. Instead, hiring a mixer who knew what he was doing only revealed those pre-mix problems to me, because I couldn't blame everything on my original mix. So this is what a few seconds of that second mix sounded like.
Imagine how great it would be if that change in the world happened 'cause of me.
Okay, so then I moved on to a third mix. This time I cleaned up what I perceived to be some of those pre-mixing issues, and I had it mixed again by the same mixing engineer. And that's the version that made it onto the EP, and it sounds like this.
Imagine how great it would be if that change in the world happened 'cause of me.
And for context, the same clip of all 3 versions back to back sound like this.
Imagine how great it would be if that change in the world happened 'cause of me. Imagine how great it would be if that change in the world happened 'cause of me. Imagine how great it would be if that change in the world happened 'cause of me.
While it got better with each version, that third and most recent version isn't perfect, as there's still the lingering effects of some of the mistakes I made in the beginning of the process. But if I were recording this track from scratch now, it would be so much different. It still wouldn't be perfect, as there's always going to be plenty to learn from, but it wouldn't be coated in all those typical beginner mistakes that have lingered in the track from mix to mix. And there's that part of me that would want to record this song again now, because it's easy to look back at your older songs when you learn new things and see what could have been better about them. But instead, I like the idea of moving forward to new songs.
Let's go.
Because otherwise I would just keep recording the same songs over and over as I continue to learn more and get better. That's why understanding everything I do as part of a learning process has become important to me. Because the older material just becomes a roadmap of where I was at the time. Okay, so the third mistake I made in this song was not having enough engaging production elements in my arrangement to make the song more intriguing in certain spots. Since it's hard to show you what's not in a song, for this point I'm going to show you some of the things I did do in a more recent track called That's Just How I'm Built.
That's just how I'm built.
Had I used some of these elements in Imagine How Great It Would Be, that song could have been a lot stronger from a production standpoint. Okay, so here are some things that I should have done in Imagine How Great It Would Be production-wise, but didn't. So one of those things is ear candy elements
Nom, nom.
that a lot of times we add into production to spice it up. And those can often be just kind of one-shot things just to add interest in particular locations of a song. So one example of that I did do in this song, That's Just How I'm Built, is I have a snare drum hit once we get into the chorus, and then I just put a ton of reverb on that single snare hit, and that really emphasizes entering the chorus. So this is what that sounds like on its own. And here it is in context of the track.
I'm a vulnerable man.
And then you'll see if I mute that part, you can see what it leaves out.
I'm a boy.
And I should mention that this is the session that I sent to the mixing engineer, so what you're hearing now is not mixed, which is why it sounds so dry. Okay, so another one of these ear candy kind of elements, a good example of that is these risers that I have going into the chorus. So it's just this kind of volume swell that sweeps up right before the chorus to build anticipation there. So I have 3 different ones, and this is what they sound like. And then all together. So then here's those in the track.
One bulldoze through their density. I'm a bulldoze
So you can hear how that builds up that anticipation. This is what it sounds like without those.
through their density. I'm a bulldoze. I'm a bulldoze.
First, it's building the tension with the risers, and then it's releasing that tension with the reverb shot. So those two work well together to help build up the chorus. Another thing that you can do, and that I could have done in Imagine How Great It Would be to have elements that come in and go out throughout the track. Not elements like the guitar and drums that are there the entire time, but just other things that just kind of create interest for a little bit and then come out. They're there longer than the ear candy kind of stuff that I'm talking about, but they're just kind of temporary arrangement elements. So an example of that in That's Just How I'm Built, I had this guitar part come in and out, which was actually part of a plugin. It wasn't an actual guitar being played. And that part on its own sounds like this. In the context of the song.
Now my hits ignite. All this strength might be overhyped. The woods up ahead.
So again, just to hear the comparison to that, this is what it would sound like without that.
Now my hits ignite.
So again, there are plenty of elements that are going on already in this song, but especially since the vocal drops out there, that little guitar part just helps fill that in a little bit better, and it just gives something for the ear to attach onto just for those moments, let you kind of miss it when it's gone. And then the last thing I want to mention here in regard to something that I could have done in Imagine How Great It Would Be, but didn't, would be to have pads. Pad is basically a long, sustained sound that's used to fill backing space, and it's usually atmospheric. So I did have an organ sound in the chorus of Imagine How Great It Would Be, but it was only in the chorus, and it probably would have been cool to have something that was more atmospheric, to have something that was in the verses and the chorus and just gave it like an airy feel just to fill things out. So here's an example of an atmospheric kind of pad that I used in That's Just How I'm Built. Here's the pad by itself, so you can hear what it sounds like on its own. And then here it is in context.
I'm a boulder rolling, tumbling down a hill, bouncing off of redwoods, playing pinball with my will.
So you're probably thinking, like, you almost don't notice it, but then what happens a lot of times with atmospheric kind of pads is then when you drop it out, it really does feel like something's missing. So now I'll start the chorus without it, and then I'll add it back in and out throughout the chorus so that you can hear what it sounds like, whether or not it's in there.
I'm a boulder rolling, tumbling down a hill, bouncing off of redwoods, playing pinball with my will. This stubborn mind, it's my only skill, oh yeah, 'cause I just keep on rolling. That's just how I'm built.
So each of these things on their own are kind of subtle, but I think when you start to add them up, it can really make a difference in the production value of the song. And had I added these things in Imagine How Great It Would Be, I can only imagine how much better it could have been. If after this entire video of me bashing Imagine How Great It Would Be, you'd still like to hear the song for some reason,
Imagine how great it would be.
there's a link on screen and below the video for that. And you can also subscribe to this channel and grab your free songwriting downloads with the links on screen and below the video as well.